session. During the executive session, we discussed a procurement issue regarding audit services for the auxiliaries. No decisions were made. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? We don't need a second for that, sorry. Just, thanks, adjourned. Took them longer to set up than it did. We have several reports today. The first is listed as the 2010 internal control report from our auditing firm, KPMG. And I believe, Shelley, you're going to do that?
Yep.
Thank you, please.
All right, so there were quite a few handouts for today's meeting. There's a PowerPoint presentation which I am going to go through. And then we're also provided with the management letter, the single audit report, the audit plan for the 2011 audits, as well as the engagement letter. So I am not planning on going through those documents unless there are questions, but the presentation covers them all. And again, on page 1, we have the agenda. Again, the management letter, the A133, and then so beginning on page 2 with the management letter, this is the management letter that includes all of the comments for the individual colleges. Each year we do visit, generally it's 8 colleges, and the sample selection of those colleges is listed here on page 2 from last year. For these colleges, we review certain areas in the current year and then update our prior year comments as well. For all of the other schools, we just update the prior year comments and obtain a status. On page 3 are the areas that we focus on for our college visits. These are the areas of where the significant transactions flow through. We review the process and the controls at each of the colleges and the test controls in each of these areas as well. And the results of those reviews and the test work is what generates the management letter comments that are included in the letter. Included on page 4 are 2 comments that related to the Office of the University Controller. I'm sorry. Did I bring that up? Besides the 19 colleges, could you all hear me before, or go back?
We can do.
We do also perform test work and internal control work at the Office of the University of Controller. And there were 2 areas where we had comments included in the letter. The first relates to investments. Management did change their process for recording transactions in their investment pool last year. Previously, they recorded them internally by management. And last year, mid-year, they changed the process to outsource that. The third-party provider does provide reconciliations to show how the transaction should be recorded, but there was no evidence that those were reviewed by management. So we are recommending that they be reviewed by management, agree to their general ledger, as well as the statements provided by the third party. The second comment relates to information technology. There were 2 comments in this area. The first relates to access. We do perform test work over the information technology general controls, and through that process of the audit, we did identify 4 people who had been terminated but not timely removed from access from the system. So we are recommending that that process be reviewed to ensure timely removal.
Shelley, a quick question. Does that mean that they had remote access, or if they were actually able to gain access to their former offices, they would have access to the computer?
I'm not sure about the remote access, but if they had access to their office, they would clearly have access to the systems.
In most instances, these are people that would have had access only through their office, not remotely.
Okay, so well, I understand it's an issue that was identified. There's certainly no indication of a security breach or anything like that.
That's correct. And the second comment relating to information technology relates to the disaster recovery. We noted that there was no testing of the disaster recovery plan on the CUNY First and FAS applications. It is recommended that that process of the disaster recovery be tested at least once a year. Okay. on page 5, we have highlighted the areas in each of the processes that we reviewed with management at the colleges. So for property management, there were various comments included in the letter that relate to inventory tagging. We noted some delays in tagging because the purchases were not being received through central receiving. Some equipment transfer policies at the colleges were not being followed. And you can see that the other various areas here where we noted either some inefficiencies that we're recommending, that processes be put in place to be more efficient, or following the policies and procedures that exist currently. Any questions on the internal control letter? 'Cause that concludes that portion.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
As I was reading through the communication, one of the items that I see in your recommendation is that you indicate we continue to, it's cited in a number of different situations where you say we continue to recommend to the college that they correct this, and then we see the response from the college. And so, as I was reading through that, when you say you continue to recommend, to me that implies that you've indicated something before, and so I don't know if the response from the college is adequate. I don't know if there's a specific follow-up because it states that it's in progress. This could easily go through some type of a do loop, and so I don't understand the I don't understand the sense of progress. I don't get a sense of progress that might be indicated on some of the items.
Well,
is it just that you audit next year and then you say, well, we again continue to recommend, or is there something that might be more definite? Do you understand the gist of my question?
Yes, and you're absolutely correct. When we do indicate continue, it was previously cited in the prior year as a comment, and we had noted it again because it wasn't completely implemented by the school. Within the comment, we do ask that the college management respond and provide a status and their progress to it. So we are looking for progress, and I think in most cases, like the response does say what they've done to date, and that's also reviewed by Barry's office as well. But we are looking for progress, obviously.
I think it's a good observation and one that we've noted as well. All of the responses from the colleges are reviewed by my office, and in many cases, we have to get back to the college and say that the response is just not adequate. We have to edit the response, and we try to make it in a way that will at least be responsive to what the auditors have said. There are instances where an observation will be repeated in the cycle, and the colleges are visited usually on 3-year cycles, and they may have made some progress but have not made complete progress. And in those instances, and especially where it may involve, for example, something with a automated procurement system or with automating the check writing, we've spoken to the auditors that have indicated that some of this will happen when the new CUNY First system comes in, and the colleges are not in a position to start spending their funds right now to do this. And so I think it really depends on the particular issue. One issue I think that has appeared in a number of the observations for the colleges has to do with disaster recovery, and that's been an area where the Computer Information Services has taken the lead. They have hired this year a disaster recovery specialist, so we expect to see that there's going to be more activity and more testing in that area. But you're right. We try to avoid we continue to note and work with the colleges on that. In some cases, it's just not something that we can control.
Yeah, but I have to say that every deficiency that's been identified, not every, but almost every one has been curable by the new CUNY First system. I'm just wondering what it will do for baldness and shortness. I mean,
Well, I'm waiting for that. But the fact of the matter is, I think that the resources that for the university are being devoted to the implementation of that system for certain areas. Certainly, there are areas that it will not touch on. But we've spoken with the colleges, and the check writing is a good example. I think that one of the schools, I think it was it Baruch, that had something like 10,000 checks that they were writing each year, refund checks. That's something that we're looking to move toward the student debit card. We're not in a position to do that right now, but we're trying to get out of the check writing business, and this is a good example of that. But I appreciate your comment.
Professor Mortale, question.
That guy with the quill is got a problem. Barry, can you help me out? There's a difference between the audited financial statements and the A133 audit, correct? And a lot of these deficiencies are really from A133 issues.
No, there are a couple of deficiencies in the A133, and I know Shelley's going to get to that.
Right.
But the A133 focuses on the student financial.
I understand that, but I mean,
Right.
the only thing that of significance that I saw that wasn't A133 related was the problem with the one school reporting late, making it difficult to close. That seemed to be I mean, there were other things, disaster recovery, but that seemed to be the one that impacted financial statements. The rest of it were interesting issues.
Yeah, I think I can respond to that. What's required to go in as a finding in the single audit, the A133, for internal control purposes, is something that meets the definition of a significant deficiency.
Right.
So if you have something that doesn't rise to the level of significant deficiency, we put it in the management letter as something
Right.
that we've noted.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
They would
That's
not
the
appear
difference.
in the.
And you got to understand, if I'm looking at these results, significant deficiency for A133 looks like $1.25. I mean, some of the deficiencies are, I mean, let's put it this way: if I can cover them, they can't be, they can't be too big a deficiency. Sorry. I mean, we're highlighting. We've identified certain deficiencies in internal controls, and you go and look at them. They're $169 in one case and $5,532 in another case for a $2 billion organization.
Are you looking at the A133?
Yeah, I am
right now?
looking at the A133.
Because it has to do with the number of findings in one particular area.
Not the dollar amount.
Not the dollar amount, no.
Sorry.
Internal control is number.
Yeah.
Okay.
In
Yeah.
fact, you'll notice, and we're probably jumping ahead, but you'll notice that that in those two areas, there were no questionable costs.
Right.
And the significant deficiency has to do with the number of findings, the number of times it's occurred, but not necessarily with the dollar amount.
And if it's been a pattern of having occurred in the past.
Well, it's clearly a pattern, right? Because
And not necessarily the same school.
Okay,
Not
Shelley?
necessarily the same kid.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next agenda
Yes.
item, which is the A133, which you led it to. So that begins on page 6. The A133 audit, like the financial statement audit, is conducted in accordance with auditing standards that are generally accepted in the United States, as well as standards applicable to financial audits contained in government auditing standards. The one difference is that an A133 audit is also conducted in accordance with federal OMB Circular A133, which is the audit of states, local governments, and nonprofit organizations. So they set certain requirements and standards that we as auditors need to consider when we perform these audits. All CUNY schools are visited during the A133, so we do make sample selections at all of the colleges. We do perform risk assessments to see if we either need to be selecting, five students from the school, 10 students from the school. It really depends on what we've seen in prior year findings and reports to determine how many we're selecting from each school. But every school is being sampled. There were 3 major programs this year. This is the first time that I have been sitting here where we just haven't done SFA. Really 2 reasons. The first is stimulus funds came in last year and they were federally funded and required to be audited by us. That was the reason why the State Fiscal Stabilization Fund cluster was selected. The second reason is the OMB Circular A133 changed how you determine your threshold for selecting major programs. So there was a threshold in place, it's a dollar threshold, so everything underneath the threshold is not considered. But because the threshold changed, previously your threshold was $3 million, it went down to a little over $1 million last year. So the Child Care and Development Block Grant cluster for the first time was over the threshold. So we did have to perform audit procedures on that as well. I'm going to turn it over to Irene for the next couple of pages.
The next page, page 7, provides a list of the federal OMB A133 compliance requirements for the student financial aid cluster that we deem to be direct material for fiscal year 10 and that we tested at each of the schools. We review the A133 compliance supplement each year to figure out which compliance requirements we think are directly material to the university and test them accordingly. As you'll see, when we get to the next few pages, student financial aid has the most compliance requirements that are directly material that we test. And we also test the internal controls and compliance requirements to make sure that they're in compliance.
Right. So our audit opinions do segregate between internal control and compliance. So if you see that, they're divided into the sections.
The next page is for the state fiscal stabilization cluster, and it lists out the 3 compliance requirements that were directly material to this cluster for fiscal year 10. The allowability, eligibility, and there were 2 special tests that we were required to look into. The next page is for the last major program, Child Care and Development Block Grant Cluster. And here there were 4 compliance requirements that were directly material: allowability, eligibility, matching, and reporting.
On page 10 were the 2 findings. Both of them related to the SFA cluster, and both of these are repeat findings from the prior year. The first relates to the timeliness of refunds and post-withdrawal disbursements. So we had identified 2 out of 182 post-withdrawal disbursements and 1 of 182 refund disbursements that were not remitted timely. No question costs, but it is considered a significant deficiency and therefore reported as a finding.
What would not be a significant deficiency? What would that number have to be? 0?
You could have, it could be 1. It could be more than 1. It also depends on the number that you're sampling
I understand.
in your population. Yeah.
But
If it's 1, it can be considered an isolated instance. If it's more than 1, obviously it's not isolated, and generally we consider the fact that there was some control deficiency that resulted in the 2.
This was a repeat, occurrence. That's why it was a significant deficiency on this particular matter.
I understand. I guess my view would be it's more, it's going to be a repeat. It's going to continue to repeat because I don't, that's a very low. 1 out of 182 is under 1%, and I don't know that even with CUNY First, with the kinds of issues we're dealing with, we're going to be able to get that number to 0. So I guess it's a deficiency, but it just doesn't seem to rise, in my mind, to the level of material,
Dealing with this for decades.
Right. And
Some of these are $7, $3.50.
I understand, and that's the point.
But that's federal government's definition.
The fact of the matter is that this is an area that we've had problems with.
Right.
In the past. We've made, I think, very significant strides in improving in this area. And I happen to agree with you. I don't think we will ever get to 0. But the fact is that it's a problem that we've had for a number of years. And according to the A133 guidelines, it reports as a significant deficiency, but not to the point where the Department of Education is looking to come in and do any further audit and say to us that you're on probation and penalized. Although that was an issue several years ago, and we've, as I said, we've improved significantly in that area. So, I think none of us are happy with this, and we've argued the point with Shelley and with her predecessors as well. But at this point, we've just made the progress. We're showing that, and I think we have to accept it at this level.
I agree, and no, my comment should not be misconstrued to suggest that this should not continue to be a priority item for us, but I do want the committee and anyone watching this to understand that while it's a deficiency in internal controls, it's hard for me to imagine we could get that number below 1%.
We're in agreement.
I guess
Right.
is there, what is the opinion of the auditor in terms of this being a significant deficiency or
Not
not?
significant.
Well, we consider it to be a significant deficiency. That's why we're reporting it as such.
And we accept it
Because
as the
there were
audit
three
committee.
exceptions, so.
Okay.
The second item, also a repeat finding relating to student status confirmation reports. Essentially, when a student withdraws or has a change in status, goes below 6 credits, and has a loan, it needs to be reported that they have a change in status so that the student can begin to enter into repayment status. And we did identify 5 out of 76 students who were not submitted timely. And again, no question costs, and finding is considered a significant deficiency. It should be noted that 2 of the 5 were, I guess, very unique. And I say unique, but yet it happened for 2 of them, where the person's first name changed. And that's not, I guess legally 2 people out of our sample changed their first name. The first name is not a data point that was being tracked. So it kept being kicked back. I mean, I think management realized there was a problem, but didn't realize why. And later it was discovered that the first name had changed. So it wasn't being matched up, which is why it was being kicked out. Okay.
For the record, we realize your firm does not create the regulations. Okay.
Any questions on the A133?
Thank you very much.
We'll look at the audit plan. I've highlighted it in here on page 11 is the agenda, but moving on to page 12, it includes the senior engagement team with myself as the engagement partner, Lou as the client service and national industry director, Erin and Irene are returning as the managers, and Jack Regan as the concurring review partner. All of these members have stayed the same since last year. 13, just our methodology. I mean, essentially, it's 4 phases. We look at risk. We put procedures in place to specifically audit risk areas by performing control test work and substantive test work, and then wrapping up in completion by issuing a report and a management letter. So this is much more detailed in the audit plan itself. On page 14, we've included the audit timeline. So today, you are reviewing and approving the audit plan. We do plan to perform our interim procedures on May 31st through August. That's where we're doing our campus visits. We're looking at the internal controls at the colleges, as well as performing the A133, or the majority of the A133 test work at the colleges happens at that time. And then we return in September and October, we do most of our work at central office, looking at the substantive procedures on the year-end balances. October, November, we will be returning, communicating to you the audit results, and then issuing the financial statements, as well as the senior college report. And then returning and meeting with you again, probably in the February time period when we issue the A133. Page 15 lays out all of the deliverables, which are consistent with last year. We do issue a report on the financial statements of the university. We do also issue a report on just the senior colleges, and that is something that we do for the state. The state brings in the senior colleges only. So they have asked that we opine on the financial statements of just the senior colleges. We issue the A133 report, and then the management letters.
Is the senior colleges done by colleges with composite for senior colleges?
No, it's all of the senior colleges.
As one financial
As one
statement?
financial statement. So when we issue the combined financial statements, there are schedules in the back
Right.
that break out the community and the senior. It's essentially moving those seniors, the senior column, up to the front.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what we're issuing.
The senior college financial statements that Shelley is referring to are done as a consolidated senior college. But we do provide each of the colleges their own unaudited financial statements, and they have access to use those.
Wait a second, if the total is audited, why wouldn't the sum of the total also, if the sum of the total is audited, doesn't that imply the individuals are audited as well?
Well, KPMG has not reviewed that. It would require more work on their part to go out and review, and probably a larger sample from each of the schools that they now engage in.
Yeah, we're auditing at the materiality level. Where's that word again, materiality?
That we never wanted to find, I understand.
At the senior college level. So we would obviously have a much lower level of materiality if we were opining on the individual colleges.
Thank you.
During our interim test work, we visit 9 of the CUNY colleges, and we visit each college at least once every 3 years based on our rotation requirements, or if there were any changes in management, or based on the results of our previous visits. This year, the 9 colleges are listed on page 16. 4 of them we had to visit this year due to the rotation requirements, and the other colleges we discussed with the central office management and decided to visit these for the internal control procedures for the financial statement audit. The next page includes some significant audit areas and significant estimates that we identified during the financial statement audit. There are detailed audit procedures included in the audit plan that we provided today. Some of the significant audit areas: tuition fees, accounts and loans receivable, debt, capital assets, cash and investments, payroll and fringe benefits, financial reporting, appropriations. And again, you can see all the detailed procedures in the audit plan. On page 18, there are some other audit procedures that we perform. We analytically review the statement of net assets and statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in net assets. We review the journal entries that were performed and made throughout the year. We have our senior tax manager conduct interviews with the university and review any tax issues. We have our IT team perform information technology, general controls, and we also perform entity level controls at the university level. We send legal letters to in-house counsel, and we review the board minutes also.
The last 2 slides is our approach to fraud risks. When we meet again in October, I will review the results of our fraud risk inquiries. But some of the things that we consider when we meet with senior management and discuss where there is a risk of fraud, these are the areas that we're considering. So where there may be incentives, pressures, opportunities for personnel to commit fraud, where there may be attitudes or rationalizations, or where there may be known fraud. So, and then on slide 20 is our fraud approach. So really our approach to fraud is throughout our entire engagement. We do address it in the planning stage by understanding where there may be risks. We're performing internal controls over those areas, substantive procedures, and it's also in the completion phase. So generally, throughout the audit, we do meet with various members of senior management that are here today. I've met with them for fraud inquiries. Peter, I'll probably add you to the list as the audit subcommittee chair, and that's somebody that we should be speaking with. Not necessarily every year, but I'll add you to the list this year. That summarizes the audit plan. It's a lot more detailed in the actual audit plan. If anybody has any questions?
Yeah. In terms of, I was just looking at the fraud risk. So, are you applying sections of Sarbanes-Oxley to some of the things that you're
It's an auditing standard. It's SAS 99, right?
Okay.
It's an auditing standard that is required for all financial statement audits, so public and non-public.
It's my understanding that we are supposed to consider and approve the the audit plan, so if we have a motion for approval of the audit plan?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Nope.
Do we need a
Approved.
motion to approve the fees separately, or is that subsumed within the audit plan?
To approve what?
There's fees associated with the,
This is, this is this is a contract that we have, where the fees have been set, and there's a contract that goes through the 2012 audit.
Right, it's already been approved.
That's been approved.
All right, then, thank you.
We're going to executive session now.
Yes, please.
I'm going to ask Shelley and Irene if they can excuse themselves. Thank you.